What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Slate. Adam Kaufman, Matt LaMarca, Matt Meiselman, just me and a couple of Matts. Pleasure to be here with you. Get to some NFL. We'll do some baseball. And, I was thinking about this, guys, our off-air show, which is always better than the on-air show, even our pre-show or off-air show Slack, where we go over the topics, things that we're going to discuss and that sort of thing. I don't know if this is, Meiselman, a perfect analogy. It's probably not, but we were talking about, hey, should we do NFL out of the gate? Should we talk a lot of football? Because it just feels like there's more of a general interest in football with the regular season less than 2 weeks away. You were quick to point out, though, while there may be more interest in football, what we have to offer informationally, so much more valuable in the world of baseball. It kind of made me feel like I was me suggesting football was like Rick James' couch in the Dave Chappelle sketch. Basically, and you are Major League Baseball coming at me.
I really don't know how to respond to that. That's just a heck of an analogy. But yeah, baseball's happening right now. In football, we've got 10 days? So we can talk a little football, but I'm ready for baseball. We've got an hour until games start, and a very important one, apparently, because the Orioles are in the playoff race, and that game is in 55 minutes. So a lot to get to.
All right. Well, why don't we begin with a little bit of NFL? And if anybody has any questions, obviously, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, wherever you're finding us, you can, offer them. We'll do our best to help answer. More often than not, I would think this time of year, we're not quite getting to the world of DFS. Of course, it's cut down day in the NFL, so cuts being made all across the league, getting those rosters down to 53 that even still will change a little bit in the weeks to come before official kickoff to begin things. But it's all about team futures and win totals and everything else available to you on the DraftKings Sportsbook. LaMarca, let's go to you first. I mean, is there one storyline above all else that's really, I don't know, garnering the most attention for you with respect to the betting market?
Well, I don't know about with respect to the betting markets. Certainly the most interesting storyline is what's going on in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. We know Trey Lance is going to be the starter, but the team has refused to release or trade Jimmy Garoppolo to this point. Maybe there's an injury in season and they end up moving Garoppolo then, but I really don't like how they are handling this situation. I think as long as Garoppolo is there, it's going to put immense pressure on Trey Lance to perform. They always say the most popular player in town is the backup quarterback. Because if your starter is even just a little bit underperforming, there's always going to be calls to replace him. And you have a guy in Garoppolo who has led the 49ers to the playoffs, to deep into the playoffs.
To a Super Bowl.
To a Super Bowl, exactly. And has proven that, he can win in this situation. So I just think it's a terrible idea to keep him on the roster if they are truly going to hand the reins over to Trey Lance. It's going to create a situation where there's going to be more pressure on him than there needs to be.
Well, it was kind of, and I guess I'm paraphrasing Meiselman, but Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, was talking about this a little bit earlier, because I think a lot of people feel as LaMarca feels and say, like, what are you doing? And Shanahan basically saying that he just feels like the two guys, in terms of not necessarily their skill level or as people or as players even, but just the fact it sort of their coexistence, for lack of a better way of putting it, is interchangeable. Whether Jimmy's the starting quarterback and Lance is backing him up, Lance is starting quarterback, Jimmy's backing him up. It's all kumbaya around here. And I just think that's a dangerous game to play internally.
Yeah, it seems like it. And also just in general, can we really trust what NFL head coaches are saying? Like, more so than other sports, because there's so many injuries and just so much stuff going on from week to week. Also, like, specific game plans and game scripts and play calling, all of that. It's so important to the game that I feel like the coaches are just playing mind games with each other at all times. Like, I don't know how much this even is true from Shanahan. So, like, it's weird. I don't really know what conclusion to draw from it other than that it's weird.
Do you believe, and it's nothing more than personal belief, there's no inside information in this regard, and in fact, if there were, it would be Jimmy Garoppolo staying right where he is, because that's the loud message that San Fran has sent. But do you believe he will go somewhere at some point this year? I know he's got the no trade clause now, But obviously, if there's an opportunity, a guy goes down, there's an opportunity for him to start somewhere. He's happily going to waive that just for the chance before free agency. So do you think that's going to happen?
It seems like he probably will only if a major starting quarterback gets hurt, right? Like there's no spot right now where any team that isn't like quote unquote tanking or, all the way at the bottom of the league. Doesn't seem like there's a spot where there's a good team for which Garoppolo would be a substantial upgrade. But at some point, someone's going to get hurt. It's the NFL. We always underestimate the degree to which injuries are prevalent. But as soon as week one's over, we're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe we all thought that all these players were going to stay healthy. The injuries are just crazy every year. So something will probably happen somewhere, and he will become a very good asset for some team. Like we can't really predict. I don't think, I know you want to talk about Tom Brady a bit. Like I'm not going to assume, something's wrong there and they're going to need Jimmy Garoppolo, but whatever. There's something will happen somewhere and he'll probably get traded to a team that needs it.
LaMarca, if you're Jimmy Garoppolo, are you willing to go? Like, I thought it was interesting that Meiselman said big time starting quarterback. That took me sort of this train of thought. Are you willing to go anywhere where you can start, where you will play? Like, are you basically, Cam Newton off the scrap heap last year, ending up back in Carolina? Or are you only going somewhere where you actually have a chance to perform well, you have weapons around you, you have a chance to go to the playoffs and win to increase your value, versus going to a situation where it's already an ugly situation? You go, you play poorly because you have nothing around you. It only hurts you leading into the market.
I think he'd be willing to go anywhere at this point, but I don't think that a team that you're describing, a bad team, quote unquote, has any interest in trading for Jimmy Garoppolo. If Davis Mills goes down for the Texans, are they going to panic and trade for a quarterback? No, because they don't care. Right. So like, I think the team that would trade for Garoppolo is a team that has high expectations, that's looking for a Band-Aid while their top quarterback is hurt. That's kind of the situation. I think that if Garoppolo gets moved, that's the one he ultimately ends up in.
Just taking a look on the DraftKings Sportsbook at where things stand in terms of division odds for the Niners going into this year with Trey Lance. Rams, understandably, obviously, are the favorites at plus 130, but then the Niners plus 150. That's not, a far cry, obviously, from where LA is. Does that make sense to you? Do you feel like the Cardinals should be viewed as better than plus 400?
So the Cardinals, to me, are the hardest team, one of the hardest teams in football to handicap, because I would say the past 2 years, when they've had a healthy Kyler Murray, they have been one of the best teams in football. I mean, they were 7-0 last year before Kyler Murray got hurt. They were something like 9-2 or 9-3 the year prior before Kyler Murray got hurt. But Kyler Murray's small and he's at high risk to get hurt in any particular game. They also are going to have to navigate the first few games of the year without DeAndre Hopkins, and their offensive numbers noticeably declined last year when Hopkins was sidelined. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think when the Cardinals are at full strength, I think they'll be pretty good, because that's what they've shown us in the past. The only question is, how many games does that actually equate to? So I would still be taking the Rams to win this division. But I do think that the Cardinals at plus 400, they're more appealing to me than the 49ers at plus 150.
Meiselman, looking at that division, you see Seattle there sitting at plus 2,000, speaking of teams that could conceivably trade for a Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you make of this division looking at it entering the season, and with Trey Lance obviously going into his first opportunity as the full-time starter?
Yeah, I think, again, like people underestimate how random football is. So the only team I would even consider picking at these numbers is the Seahawks, but I'm probably staying away from it because
I'll give you 30-1 on the Seahawks if you want.
We can do that. We can definitely do that off camera. Although we can, I guess part of the reason I like division betting so much is because as the season starts to unfold, you can kind of like find the right time to get in where, like, even if the Seahawks win and the line starts to move, like, let's say they win their first 2 games, you probably can still get them at 15-1 at that point. And then at least, yeah, it's slightly lower odds, but you're assured that they're kind of trying this year and they're not going to sell off their good players at the deadline or, give younger guys that don't deserve it too much playing time to just play for the future. So I sort of like doing that, but I would keep an eye on the Seahawks at least. But 30-1 sounds very appealing. Like, that's a lot more here. So I may have to take you up on that. the one strong take I think I have right now for NFL divisions and also week one, because it's the same matchup, is the Vikings over the Packers, where I just don't think it's being adequately accounted for just how important Devontae Adams was. And I just don't see the Packers we spent a lot of time before the show started talking about Aaron Rodgers for, I guess, different reasons than this one. But I do think this team I thought the Packers were very overrated last year. And Adams is their most important player after Rodgers. Of course, like the quarterback is always going to be more important with very few exceptions. But Adams, I think, with the exception of maybe Cooper Kupp, is the most important wide receiver in football to a team's success. And it doesn't seem like it's being priced in adequately that he's not there. So I'm not necessarily saying the Vikings should be favored in the division, but they are underdogs at home against Green Bay in week one. Like, that's a bet that I'm definitely interested in, because these teams are close enough to each other, I think, that home field advantage moves the needle towards Minnesota, at least for a one-game sample. And then as far as division odds too, yeah, I think like the Packers are reasonably large favorites over the Vikings. I think, do we have that line? If you can scroll up slightly, I forget exactly what it is. Yeah, like minus 190.
130 or 90. Yeah, pardon me.
Minus 190 to plus 260. Like, yeah, maybe the Packers should be even money and the Vikings should be like plus 150. I think it should be much more narrow. So I'm interested in the Vikings. I probably will just bet them for week one, but I have much stronger feelings here than I do in the NFC West.
I do want to go to talk about Tom Brady for a moment, but before that, just because you brought up Devontae Adams, I wasn't even thinking about this with respect to the show, but there are a lot of people out there. I mean, this is the time of the year that people have their season-long drafts. Obviously, LaMarca, sounds like got one of our leagues, happening in a few hours tonight, apparently. Devontae Adams, a guy that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, obviously, because of his new home and new situation. I wonder, in terms of ADP and placement, it's off of what we were talking about, obviously, but when you're trying to gauge LaMarca, how Devontae Adams is going to do now with Vegas, with Derek Carr, as opposed to what we've been used to seeing with obviously Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Do you think there's going to be a step back? I mean, I don't want to imply that like Rodgers has fully elevated Devontae Adams. Adams is an absurd talent, obviously, and he may just as well be able to go in there and elevate Derek Carr back to, his MVP level that he was at a few years back before he got hurt. What are we going to see out of Adams with the Raiders?
So I think Devontae Adams is one of the best wide receivers in football, but I am much more of the belief that Aaron Rodgers inflated his production than the other way around. We've seen Aaron Rodgers turn everybody that he's played with into a star. I mean, before Devontae Adams, it was Jordy Nelson. It was, who's
Randall
the guy
Cobb
that went to the Raiders, Javon something or other. Like, James Jones led the league in touchdowns one year. I think Aaron Rodgers is that good. I think he'll make it work with whoever's playing with him. And while I think that Derek Carr is probably an undervalued quarterback, he's going to have a lot more competition for targets in Oakland. Or Vegas, excuse me. He's got Darren Waller, one of the best tight ends in football. And as much as Hunter Renfrow may not seem like a football player, the guy is a short yardage fiend, kind of the new Wes Welker, I would say. And he was really good in the red zone last year, which is an area where Devontae Adams has historically thrived with Rodgers. So I think that you definitely need to temper your expectations with Adams. It's just how far down do we temper them? I think he's pretty clearly behind the top tier of fantasy wide receivers, the guys like Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. But then he's solidly in that next tier down.
Mize, thoughts?
Well, I'm slightly disappointed in LaMarca for not using Hunter Renfrow to segue to baseball, because I'm ready to go.
We will.
No, I think, really, Rodgers and Adams together elevated just not that good of a football team around them. Like, I would sort of agree, but I think it's like both of those two players are unbelievable, and the rest of the Packers are pretty underwhelming. Like, their running game was not great. They didn't really have a great offensive line. Their defense was injured a lot of last year. In terms of fantasy, though, the Packers also, when their defense did get healthy, had a lot of huge leads where they didn't need to throw in second halves of games. And I don't see that being the case with the Raiders. So, like, game flow wise, and also weather wise, which is a thing that we probably should talk about more than we do. Like, once we get to the second half and the Packers are playing outdoors for half their home games, that really takes away from statistical production. And that is not happening in Las Vegas. It's not happening really with any of the teams in that division in the AFC West. So if there is a drop down in terms of like the quarterback, I mean, there is a downgrade from Rodgers to Carr. That's very significant, but weather will be a big upgrade. So I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic about Adams. Like, I don't think he should be going behind Jamar Chase in drafts.
All right, a little bit on Brady, and then we'll go to baseball because I know there's plenty of baseball information that we have to provide in the last 25 or so minutes that we have here. But, you listen to Brady in recent days. Only time he's really spoken, obviously, was after that last preseason game and sounded just very human and dejected, maybe a little emotional, with his 45 years old, got a lot of crap going on, to paraphrase him, and some of the other stuff that, everybody has their theories. There are rumors out there about what's, been going on in his life that caused the 11-day absence from training camp. And we don't need to get into all that, other than it seems like whatever it is not done. He's still dealing with it. He's still coping with it, good or bad. It's lingering a little bit here. And I can't help, from a betting perspective, looking at the DraftKings sports book, seeing the Buccaneers as good as they've been since Brady arrived. They're plus 700, second best odds to win the Super Bowl. Brady, voted by his peers as the number one player in the NFL, even at 45 years old. And I think he should have been MVP last year as well. Lost out to Rodgers, finished second, but this is different. As well as he did play coming back from that absence in the preseason game, he does have some new weapons. There are some injuries on that Tampa team. Aspects of the team have taken a little bit of a step back. It feels a little nutty to me, LaMarca, that the Bucs are so prevalent in terms of the respect and the odds that they're sitting at right now, versus maybe just a little engine that could there that I might have otherwise expected.
Yeah, I think that Tampa Bay, if anything, they're going to become a betting value if this becomes the narrative. We've seen Tom Brady doubted before. It doesn't happen often, but it happens, and he always seems to take that chip on his shoulder and turn it into something spectacular. I mean, and the guy can clearly still play football. He led the league in completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns last year. You mentioned that they have some new weapons on offense, but they're like really good weapons, right? They brought in a slot guy in Russell Gage. They brought in Julio Jones. We'll see if he has anything left in the tank. The offensive line is a bit more concerning. We know Brady likes a clean pocket. He does not like to be pressured, specifically from up the middle. But I have zero qualms about Tom Brady. If in our fantasy draft tonight, if I miss out on the top quarterbacks, I have no problem with Tom Brady being my starter this season. Until the guy shows me that he is done either mentally, physically, or emotionally, I have zero reason to expect anything different from him.
Meiselman, is similar for you. Tom Brady can roll out of bed and still be one of the greatest players in the league, so no area of concern.
I think I'm slightly concerned, but I don't have a ton to add. Like, I think, we mostly shouldn't be concerned, but this is something to at least pay attention to. Like, I don't want to totally ignore the stories around him. One thing I do want to call out while we have the futures odds on screen, though, because I didn't realize this, Football Outsiders now has their Super Bowl odds out. 1 through 6 roughly looks the same as where the odds are, with a few teams swapped. But instead of being number 4, they have the Packers as the 11th most likely team to win the Super Bowl. And they have the Philadelphia Eagles number 3, which I was not expecting to see here. So I'm now, in all likelihood, going to be someone from New Jersey who has had futures primarily on the Boston Celtics, Philadelphia Phillies, and now Philadelphia Eagles in 3 consecutive sports seasons. I don't know if my friends are going to let me in their apartments ever again, but these are now my teams. Cause I'm not going to just go here on the Eagles. Like, this is something I want to look into more, but it's at least some confirmation about the Packers anyway. But yeah, the Bucs, I'm sure by any analytical model, are in the top 3. I think we can all agree the Bills are the best team. The fact that they're favored on the road against the Rams that's quite a testament to how good this team is supposed to be. But unless something fundamentally changes with Tampa, I still think we should expect them to be at least near the top in the NFC this year.
Well, it just
One
goes to show
quick
you.
thing I want to add about the Packers.
I think, by the way, plus 1,000 for the Packers, fourth best odds is nuts. But go ahead.
It's probably a little bit high. But the one thing I will say, I love analytics in any sport, but they're not perfect, right? I mean, we see this all the time in baseball. There are guys who consistently outperform their peripherals as pitchers. For one reason or another, their ERA is always a half a run lower or a full run lower than their FIP or their xERA or their Sierra, whatever metric you want to use. I'm starting to think the Packers might be that kind of team in football, right? They've won 13 games each of the past 3 seasons, and their, Pythagorean expectation is somewhere between 9.5 and 10.5 wins in all 3 of those years. To me, if you do it once, it's a fluke. If you do it 3 years in a row, I'm starting to think there might be something to it. Part of it obviously stems from they have one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history who can consistently pull out close games late. And I think that their coaching staff is pretty above average as well. So we'll see. This is a big year for Rodgers and the Packers. If losing Devontae Adams makes them drop back to the pack, then we'll know that he was really more of the reason why they've been so successful the past 3 years. But I think that between some of the guys they brought in, they're going to use Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon in the passing game more. I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers exceeded expectations once again, because that's what Aaron Rodgers has shown as a track record.
All right, let's mix in a little baseball in the last 20 minutes or so. Again, if anybody has any thoughts, questions, anything like that, we see you, Robbie Noble, and we love you. Thanks for watching, everybody else as well. We'll keep it moving here. Do a little baseball. Let me pull it up on the DraftKings Sportsbook. We have got, obviously, there are a trio of games starting during the 6 o'clock hour. So those get started in, an hour or less. There's a big one coming up at 6:10. Wild card playoff implications, as Meiselman talked about, with the Orioles and Guardians in Cleveland. That's at 6:10 Eastern, so that's in about a half hour. From a betting perspective, Matt, because that's what the people care about, what are you looking at? What jumps out at you?
All right, so there's 3 things I'm looking at today that are like the key things. I'll let you guys pick where we want to start, but the Orioles and just playoff odds in general, I think there's a lot of mispriced things in the futures market on make and miss.
Let's go to the Orioles.
All right, Let's start there. I will save the other 2 for after. Although I just want to very briefly call out one of the other ones is based on news that we just got. So Isaac Paredes is out for the Rays against the Marlins. And I already was pretty interested in both the Marlins money line and Jesus Luzardo's strikeout prop. And this is going to be pretty beneficial for both of those with Christian Bethancourt, who's a backup catcher, filling in for him. So, we can start Orioles. I just want to give a quick shout out to that some lines could be on the move in the Marlins game.
That's a big downgrade. So good shout out.
Thank you.
When you say you want to start with the Orioles, you want me to go to the team futures here?
Yeah, let's go to team futures and make miss playoff odds.
Okay.
Okay, so we can now get the Orioles at only minus 370 to miss the playoffs. And I remember when we were talking about them at 8-1 or 12-1 or whatever to get in, and I still wanted to bet no. And that looks pretty dumb now, but the hype is too far. This is it just reminded me of, again, while LaMarco was talking about teams, having some intangible and overperforming. I think a lot of people would argue that the Orioles just have intangibles that are making them win. Baseball is too statistically dependent, and there's too much is knowable to really have that compared to other sports like in football, where late game coaching decisions have such a big impact. That's just not how baseball works. We have so much more we can quantify and so much less that is unknown. So I think we have a pretty good idea generally just how good teams are. And the Orioles, I think, have just been very, very lucky this year, specifically with a pitcher like Spencer Watkins, who somehow just has an ERA that is totally undeserved. I think there is a little bit of something to Adley Rutschman and clubhouse boost that he's given them, but that's a very minuscule factor in my opinion. I think Fangraph still is this team with a single-digit probability percentage-wise to make the playoffs. And I'm not sure that I fully buy that number because, again, they are overachieving and maybe some of these players are better than certain projection systems think, but the idea that the Orioles are now north of 20% to make the playoffs, which is what you'd probably need something where like 25 to 30% for this line to make any sense. I'm not buying it. Like, I think we're still talking 15%, maybe lower. And they still have to pass one of the teams in the American League Central, and then another team that is currently in the wild card, which would be either Toronto, Seattle, or Tampa. And I think all those teams are significantly better. So
Orioles are only 2 games back, though.
It's not a lot of games, but they have to leapfrog multiple teams. So,
well, at the moment, they only have to leapfrog one. Just to
right. Are they currently ahead of Minnesota? Is that why?
Yeah, they're one game ahead of the Twins.
Okay,
so but Tampa and Toronto are separated by Tampa, Seattle, Toronto. Those 3 teams are separated by a game, and then you got the Orioles and the White Sox or Twins rather. White Sox are obviously on the outside looking in, 6.5 back.
Yeah, I'm willing to put the Orioles on the same tier as the White Sox, who I feel like we can victory lap this briefly. The White Sox have just fallen off a cliff. And only 7 days ago, we were talking about them at like minus 140 to miss the playoffs. Now it's minus 600. So yeah, the White Sox are bad. And Tim Anderson being out had a lot to do with that. But we knew, like, the odds already knew that was already accounted for, and we still were getting, close to even money. But sure, the Orioles may be as good as the White Sox, but does anyone really think they're as good as Tampa or Seattle or Toronto at this point?
I wouldn't have thought so going into the year, obviously. I mean, this is a surprise, but LaMarca, you can't ignore what they've been doing. Like, I guess at a certain point, when do they prove something to you?
Well, they're going to have a big time chance to prove something to us because their remaining schedule, they have 4 left versus the Astros. They have 3 left versus the Yankees, and they have 10 games versus the Blue Jays. 10 games. So
that's almost as many as they'll play all of next season.
It's all there for Baltimore, right? Like, you can take that as a positive or a negative, right? They do control their own destiny, but that also means that they're going to have to beat teams like Toronto and the Yankees and the Astros in order to get into the playoff positioning. So I'm with Meiselman. I think that they are overpriced right now. They have that magical quality to them that I think casual bettors gravitate towards, but stuff like that happens. I'm with Matt. I'm betting the Orioles not to make the playoffs, but it also wouldn't be a huge shock to me if it happened. I mean, Seattle made the playoffs last year with a negative 57 run differential. Like, anything can happen. I know baseball is a long season and that tends to mitigate some of the randomness, but Baltimore may just be getting hot at the right time. Who knows, right? I'm with Matt. The number is off. Mathematically, it's a good value to take the Orioles to miss the playoffs. But those games with Toronto are going to have a huge impact on who gets in and who doesn't.
And just to clarify something, I think we're sort of on the same page. No one here thinks they have no chance. It's just minus 370. It really should be like minus 600 or minus 700.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of people would scoff at the idea of like betting a favorite of this degree. For those people, I mean, sure, you can parlay it with something else. That's always like one easy solution for people. But you still, like, this is potentially a 20% return on your money in a month. Like, if you give someone that in another context, they'd be very excited about it. And if the thing is very likely to win, like more so than the odds are implying, then it's still worth doing. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt is going to win National League MVP, and he was minus 400 2 days ago. And for people to just like look at that and say, yeah, I don't want to bet minus 400. Like, what else? If it's that close to a lock, which I don't think this is, Goldschmidt for sure at this point, like, something really crazy would have to happen for Goldschmidt not to win MVP, but people should take advantage of lines when they're minus 300, 400, 500, perhaps even higher. As long as like the probability of the event occurring is high enough. So like Sandy Alcantara, now that we've got the Gonsolin injury, Burns was terrible last night. Carlos Rodon was terrible last night. It's basically just Max Fried, who has any chance for the NL Cy Young. Like, I think minus 600 for him is way too low. Like, Alcantara is something like a 95% chance to win the Cy Young at this point. So people should be laying long odds, particularly on futures where it's like easy to hedge at a certain point. But also, like, some of these things are 90+% chance to actually happen. Like, what is the scenario where Alcantara doesn't win the Cy Young at this point?
I don't see one.
Yeah, so you're getting like it's like a 16% return in the seasons. I mean, the awards will be in what, 2.5 months? Like I think it's close to over.
I love it.
I've already done this one, so this isn't just hypothesizing. Like this is, I think this is the current best player award bet you can make because Goldschmidt is now minus 1,400, so you can't really take that one at this point.
And looks like the American League Cy Young, those odds are still off the board currently with this news from Justin Verlander earlier. If anybody missed it, he obviously was the Cy Young favorite, but placed on the 15-day injured list, calf injury, 16-3, having a great year, sub-2 ERA, just ridiculous. I mean, this guy doesn't age, obviously. For anyone that thought he'd go to Houston and all of a sudden, drop back from what he was as a Tiger, it's like he's only gotten better. But we'll see. Hopefully he's back, obviously, for the playoffs and can continue to do Verlander things. But
they say it's going to be a short stay.
They say it should be.
I'm using this opportunity to double down on Verlander to win the Cy Young.
Let's see what the odds actually are, but I'm fully in agreement with you. If we get something like minus 150 or close to even money still, if the odds tank because of this, then I think that's a really good call because he may only miss 2 starts.
Right.
And as we've talked about before, every narrative factor is in his favor. He's coming off a major injury. He's aging. He plays for the best team in the American League. And the guy who's opposing him is a young pitcher who plays for a really bad team. Like, I think the voters are going to say, let's give one more. If it is like a coin flip situation, it'll be, let's give one to the guy that probably won't be back here again, as opposed to the young guy who will have other opportunities in the future.
I do want to add, though, we had talked about Shane McClanahan being out of this for a few weeks, and it was really looking like it. His fastball velocity was declining for like 4 straight starts. And then he went out against the Angels and was throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs by Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. He is probably live again. Like, I still think he's third, and probably a semi-distant third, but it's not over for him anymore. Like, I think we saw enough from him in his last start against the Angels where it's like, okay, McClanahan is, and he's pitching tonight, so we'll get a better look at him. When the odds come back tomorrow, I guess a lot of what McClanahan has done tonight against the Marlins will be part of that new line. But it was looking like McClanahan's season was really dwindling. And this is part of why I think like the Rays are in a good spot for the playoffs too, is if McClanahan isn't hurt, like we kind of talked about, then he is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's been unbelievable this year. So I think, he's third in the Cy Young pecking order right now, but he's looked pretty good in the more recent starts compared to like 4 or 5 starts ago.
Verlander,
Can I talk about a wager?
Please go ahead. I was just going to remark Verlander being 39 years old in Houston, no less, obviously, after not pitching last year. Like, it's like the Roger Clemens story all over again with what this guy's doing. But go ahead.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the make or miss playoff odds. I think we have a nice chance for some, I don't want to say locked in profit, but there are 2 teams right now in my eyes that are fighting for one playoff spot in the NL, right? Mm-hmm. I think we all see the Braves solidly in either as a wild card team or maybe they leapfrog the Mets. And I think that the Phillies, a team me and Matt have talked about, particularly Matt, he loves the Phillies, are pretty solidly in the playoffs as well. That leaves San Diego and Milwaukee fighting for essentially one spot. And you can get both teams at plus money to miss the playoffs. So San Diego, I think, was at plus 180 to miss. Milwaukee is at plus 130. You could theoretically bet both of them. But I like the idea of taking Milwaukee to miss the playoffs at plus 180. I'm sorry, the Padres to miss the playoffs at plus 180. And the big reason why is just remaining schedule. San Diego still has 9 left with the Dodgers. They have 3 left with the Cardinals. They have 2 with the Mariners. They have the second hardest remaining schedule in terms of opponent winning percentage. Meanwhile, Milwaukee is down in 21st. They do have 3 left with the Mets, 3 left with the Yankees, and 4 left with the Cardinals. But other than that, those are the only teams with winning records remaining on their schedule. They have 7 with the Reds, 7 with the Diamondbacks, 4 with the Marlins. It's a very favorable schedule for Milwaukee, and they are only 1.5 back of San Diego in the wild card race as things speak. So I think getting them at plus 180, the Padres, that is to miss the playoffs is an appealing wager for me.
Game and a half in front of the Brewers at the moment, with Padres being the third team in the National League currently. What do you think, Meiselman?
Yeah, I actually I like that Brewers one a lot. Like Padres, I think I like the idea of both of those because yes, I'm very pro Phillies also, but the Brewers in particular, we just saw Rowdy Tellez leave the game with an injury last night. He's not in the lineup tonight. I think we've talked about on this show recently that he's probably the Brewers' best hitter. So if that turns into an extended absence, yeah, like the Brewers, I think end up being the most likely of this group to be the odd man out. So yeah, I'm on anything that's pro Phillies. It's very easy to sell me on, but I like this idea in general, but especially the Brewers. Before we run out of time though, I want to go to this Cubs Blue Jays game because I think it's especially relevant for DFS also. I think we've got a little both to look at there.
Happy to, as I've said.
All right, let's do it. So Kevin Gausman is going to be the most popular pitcher in DFS tonight. And I also think the Cubs money line and team total are very intriguing spots because this Cubs offense is significantly better, I think, than people realize.
Yes.
We're getting Wilson Contreras back from the IL. This is what, like his second or third game back. Ian Happ, I've just pulled up his Fangraphs page. He has a 126 WRC plus this year, and that's like actually in line with his career average. I didn't realize he was like legitimately a well above average hitter. But the other one that's surprising me, Nico Horner, 3.5 WAR this year, been over 100 as a middle infielder for 2 consecutive seasons in terms of his WRC plus. Like this is actually a semi decent lineup. And then they just added Franmil Reyes, who has had a down year, but right-handed power is kind of what you want against Gausman. And I think that's like, it sets up well here with the roof now open in Toronto too, which helps a little bit. But right-handed power against Gausman, because he's a fastball changeup guy, is probably the best way to beat him. He's very extreme with the way he pitches with so many changeups and so much reliance on that pitch. So overall, I think Gausman is just a little overrated. And then the Cubs offense is legitimately underrated. And we're getting a huge money line on this game at almost 2-1. So I like all things related to Cubs offense tonight. And then when it comes to DFS, if Gausman is going to be the most popular pitcher, there's probably 3 guys I'd rather play than him. Just like the other top price pitchers, I think are all better options than him because they'll all be lower ownership. So I'm very excited about the Cubs today. Like, I'm not picking them outright. I just think this is a money line we're seeing at 185 that probably should be like 145 or 135 or something like that, where you are getting a good amount of value. Like this game isn't quite a coin flip, but I think it's pretty close to one. And then if you want to just be more conservative with a pick on the Cubs, you can just go to the team total. I think that's like the most direct way to go about it. I think it's probably right at 3. There's always different options. Like you take over 3.5 and get like plus 120 or take over.
I was going to say, Matt, I like just the over 8 in general because Marcus Stroman stinks.
I sense a little bit of Mets bias from you. I think I would lean there too in general. Alejandro Kirk is out of the lineup tonight. I would not bet the under. I'll say that. So if I had to pick pick a part of the total, I'm leaning over also. But yeah, over 2.5 at minus 150. Like that's a weird line, but I certainly would be interested in that. Maybe just can we parlay Cubs money line with the over? How do you feel about that one?
Sure.
All right, then we get a little bit of what we're both looking at. But I think, yeah, I don't love Stroman either. I don't expect the Blue Jays to be held scoreless or anything. I did have the Cubs last night. It was 4-0 through 7 innings, and then Toronto came back and won. So that would be pretty frustrating. So yeah, I guess like there's a bunch of different ways to play this, but the primary place I want to attack it from is just the Cubs offense.
Cubs money line with the over, just to look at it. So you were, I don't know.
They're not going to let you do this one. It would have to be the Cubs money line, the over 8.
You have to go into the same game parlay feature too.
Oh yes. The little toggle switch that we've had some fun with over the last few weeks.
That's true. Well, we can do that later when we actually have some more time. But I know the Derek Carr's Raiders are coming up in Simland against the Bengals in a little bit. But anything, LaMarca, whether it's this game that obviously you guys have been talking about or a different game altogether, what jumps out at you before we go?
Matt Manning for the Tigers, the best pitcher in baseball that you probably don't know about yet. He's plus 145 tonight against the Mariners. I really enjoy that line. If you wanted to take under 7.5 because the Tigers can't score any runs, I'd be fine with that too. But I think plus 145 is just a very appealing number with a guy who was a really hyped prospect who is starting to come into his own.
Meisman?
Yeah, I'm confused about Matt Manning because he's been so good lately. And like, where is this coming from? I mean, he was a top prospect. So I guess sometimes this just happens, right? You get a top prospect who isn't very good, can't strike anyone out for like 2 years. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is why everyone liked him. Yeah, with more of my like analytics focus, this is probably the thing that I'm going to miss more than honestly, just someone like LaMarca, who's like paying more attention to, I don't know, just like game watching, I guess, right? I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, younger pitchers making like changes to their pitch mixes. Hopefully it's an area where analytics can get better because it's really hard to quantify these things sometimes, but there's no question Manning has looked quite good. At least last start, I think that was the one against Cleveland. There was a very big strikeout game. It was probably the White Sox because the White Sox are always the bad offense.
The Red Sox obviously are going to be playing again tonight, an important game against the Twins, more important for Minnesota than Boston at this point, although there was some news for anyone wondering. Sam Kennedy, president of the team, told The Athletic manager Alex Cora and general manager, or technically the chief baseball officer, Chaim Bloom, both are expected back next year after what's going to be probably a very interesting offseason for that team with, a lot of money likely coming off the books. But so that's, for my Red Sox fandom and for Matt, who likes to bet Boston from time.
Cash your tickets on Kaufman ending the show with a Boston take.
Little footnote for you. I don't even have a take other than stop watching this season.
This isn't a take either.
Don't waste your time.
This isn't a take either, but just from yesterday, there were a lot of people upset about the way the Phillies' first 5 innings ended. The Red Sox first 5 innings wasn't quite as disappointing, but with a 2-1 lead in the bottom of the 5th, they gave a base clearing double. And that, for me personally, was very upsetting. The Red Sox continue to just be a letdown every game. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to grab the run line in some of those Toronto games.
Oh, there you go.
But still, it should have been so much better. So I don't understand this season. They're 7 games under 500 now. It's kind of just a disgrace. I'll still keep taking them. Like, I think they're undervalued tonight too. So maybe that is a take. Like, it's a pick 'em game where they're plus 120, but I'm very
5 under 500, but 8 back in the wild card standings. And LaMarca, I did bring it up for more than anything for just, branding and synergy across the DraftKings media network, if you will. For anyone that missed the sweat earlier, Jared Carabas was in studio, did a little Red Sox therapy lying on a couch, it was quite a thing. You should check it out. It's available for you on replay on YouTube and Twitter. I'm sure he tweeted it out. It's a fun watch. Maybe went on a few minutes too long, but it's a fun watch. You should go back and
speaking of going on too long.
Yeah, that's us. We got to go. Simland, Raiders, Bengals coming up at the top of the hour, a couple of minutes from now. This show comes your way after the 4:00 Madden Sim, right around 5:15 each and every day. Tomorrow, it'll be a golf show, so make sure you tune in for that. And of course, the Sweat, 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Thanks to Eamon, Undercover Boss Tom, T. Pike, LaMarca, the Mats, LaMarca and Meiselman. I'm Adam Kaufman. We'll see you later.